as much as for myself as for everyone else here. But no matter who I am with, I always start with a little mindfulness practice just to let us land. And so I'm going to invite you now just to feel your feet on the ground, the floor. The floor ultimately connects with the ground, and just noticing that the sensation of the feet touching. And I'm sitting, perhaps some of you are standing, which would be great, but just begin to feel your seat and how you're sitting and how you can sit or stand tall, noticing your hips, your shoulders. Are they over your hips? Is your head over your shoulders? And now just notice your breath. You don't need to change anything. We're just noticing. And I'm going to move back from the screen a little bit, but I'm just going to invite you. Everything's an invitation that I share today. Maybe just to take a couple of breaths with movement, bringing the arms up and then exhaling down, inhaling up, exhaling down, and one more time. And now just noticing again, maybe noticing if anything is different. And I will just say to you now, and we'll be touching upon this as we go forward, but there were three principles of Asahi there in terms of just bringing some mental awareness to letting us settle in. And so it doesn't matter if I'm working with law enforcement, judges, schools, which I love, early educators. This is what we do. We kind of check in that we can land, be aware, body aware, well as mentally aware, aware of our alignment because of the crisis of sitting, this public health crisis, which we'll be talking about. And then breathing with movement is very key to Asahi, and it's very key. It's a very effective approach to the breath. But enough of that for now. We start with the breath just like Asahi does in each of its modules. I want to tell you, in addition to the natural interest in sitting as a public health crisis, in fact, in public health, it is said that if it weren't for the pandemic of COVID, we would be discussing the global pandemic of sitting. And that is really coming to the forefront now. And I'm going to share some research with you that has been building and growing. And they're very big studies looking at the physical and the mental health effects of prolonged sitting. But I am also interested in it relative to the stress of sitting on the nervous system. And the way I discovered this myself is, and now I think we are seeing it in so many different ways in modern society and post-pandemic relative to COVID, if we can use that term, is that my world was working. So as a public health scientist, my job was very much being in with large groups in crowded settings and sharing the work that we do. And I was moving. I was able to move all the time. And I think most people have a certain level of stress with speaking anyhow. I love that Asahi addresses that in their book. But I was able to move that nervous energy out. When the pandemic started and everything was in this pixel, staying in this little box, I noticed my stress level skyrocketed. And it took me a while to realize, because especially trying to stay still in front of the camera, not move too much and so forth, and the increased hours of sitting, but how we sit as well, it was a big aha. And that's when I started to look at this connection with the nervous system, and have now become profoundly interested in how health practices like Asahi can be, it's more than about good for you. It's actually has a prevention component to the effects that we're seeing. And then we'll move in, that's our trail map, and we'll move into some discussion and questions and answers. So I hope that sounds okay for everyone, and welcome your input. But when we're talking about the negative effects of anything, I want to be able to put on the table first that there's something we can do about it. And that is very true. And it's supported by a lot of research that physical activity is prevention. And we are we are seeing these big studies that show us that sitting, particularly without getting up to move, which ironically we're going to be doing a bit here, but that it has a very high risk. And that's why the language around smoking is or sitting is the new smoking has come about. And I will say to you that some of the research shows that it is, no, we don't want anyone to smoke, but actually some of the effects even go beyond what we see with smoking. And on the other side of it, that daily moderate physical activity, mixed levels of intensity can counter that. And these are big studies that we're looking at. I'll point out some of the characteristics of those, because as an epidemiologist, that's what I'm looking for, is that we can really have reliable data to make the kind of statements we're seeing like this, that exercise is the most powerful drug we have, that recent research, very interestingly, at the cellular level is showing us that exercise can turn the clock on aging muscles. So this is great news. The not so great news is that we have global studies that include lots of countries. The PURE study, it's perspective, and that's really important because it means we're looking forward and we're following people. So it gives us very reliable data. In this case, 21 countries, the median age about 50 years old. This might be more information than you want about this, but I just want to share the big picture, and then I'll talk about some US data as well. But median sitting time 4 hours, and we see a range from Poland at 2.6 to, when we look the higher income countries, more sitting. And so we see that 7.3 hours a day with Saudi Arabia. Bottom line here is that around the globe, physical inactivity is increasing. And when this study looked then at the health data that they were collecting forward for all those years, they could see a significant association with increased cardiovascular deaths, myocardial infarctions, so heart attacks, heart failure, strokes, and interestingly, all cause mortality. And this is a bit of a surprise. And it's been now shown in a US study as well, that is a large study, but sitting too much hurts our hearts and it hurts our health. And the other side of this again is that when you start replacing time of sitting, and I'm not talking just about a standing desk. I have one of those. You need to move too, to be able to reduce that risk of mortality and cardiovascular disease. This is US trends, and acutely aware that, we sit too much. What am I going to pull out here? Beyond the 6.5 hour average for American adults, a great worry to me is that adolescents are sitting even more, 8.2 hours. I work a lot on adolescent brain development. This is a brain that is changing, it's going through a huge remodeling. It's very exciting, tremendous potential. However, the brain needs to move to learn. Finnish schools understand that very well. When I go into classrooms in Finland with experiential learning, I see way more movement than I have seen in the schools that I get to work with in the US. Hopefully we're changing that, we keep pushing for that. But there are areas of the brain that rely on movement to be able to grow and reach its potential. And I could go off on a trail there, but I won't. So levels again of inactivity clearly in America are increasing. This is another prospective study there where you have a big cohort and you're following people forward. So it's very reliable data in the world of an epidemiologist, and we see here connections that kind of surprise us. It's beyond the looking at kidney disease, digestive disorders, different types of cancer, which I'll note in another slide, pulmonary disease, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. And so you're seeing entities like HealthBeat, Harvard Health Publishing, which does a lot of great reports, putting out statements like, stand up, and I would say move for your health, and give some very specific examples, and just making the connection. The American Cancer Society, that sitting time is connected not just to the type of cardiovascular diseases and issues that we see, but also to cancer. And so the terminology is coming around of sitting disease, which it's catchy, and it's not truly codified as a disease, but we're seeing this constellation of effects that go with this rising level of inactivity that the World Health Organization is noting along with everyone else. So it's very real. And just a few more, things here that, no surprise you're going to see. I'm going to go back here just a moment. This is not alignment. And this is and I know I'm doing it right now. There is a natural draw of the head to the screen that is a special issue and risk with video conferencing and such, and all the technology that especially when we get to smartphones and so forth. So that alignment, the hip, legs crossed, the hips not level, just a lot of interesting issues there that when we become aware of how we move, and we can take that to how we sit, that could prevent the back, neck, and hip pain that we're seeing, higher blood pressure. The systems can't work the way they are supposed to when we're seeing the connection with metabolic disease relative to elevated blood sugar, cholesterol, the particularly dangerous excess weight, body fat around the waist, but also as someone who flies a lot, deep vein thrombosis, I'm wearing, my special socks on the plane, but the risk is right here as I'm sitting at home if I'm not getting up and moving. And the list of cancers that are being connected when we look at the different sources, universities, the Mayo Clinic, and so forth, ranging from colorectal to long breast, prostate, and some of the female cancers. So the list is getting longer the more research that there is. And I promise not to pitch too many more studies at you. I know it's only epidemiologists get excited about data, but it's not exciting for everybody. But just looking at, when we sit and thinking about, what happens to the capacity of our lungs? It's dramatically reduced. And this is fairly good posture, holding that laptop yet and sitting like that. But we have a dramatic reduction in the capacity of the lungs. So it tends to change how we breathe, and that arrow to the chest is I live in a nation of chest breathers where we are using accessory muscles to breathe. And this type of breathing up here is a recipe for anxiety. And it's a self-feeding loop, which is why just doing a little movement with breath can start to shift the nervous system. And when we're breathing up here, the diaphragm, that big pink like jellyfish or parachute that you see there on the right, it's not able to move fully. And it has a very key role relative to the nervous system because of the vagus nerve passing through, but also and moving up and down in terms of massaging the organs, facilitating digestion. When I was early in my training, I was given a medical book by a physician back from the early 1900s. And he had written about the digestive problems, blood sugar, and so forth that he was seeing in children and adults with poor posture. And see how this that observation, and now as we've learned, he was so on point for the issues that we're seeing that plague when we have 60% of Americans over the age of 60 who have at least one chronic disease. I'm just clicking through here. So I'm going to make a few comments about the nervous system now, and that is very much core to my work. But when I'm not seeing quite the top of the slide, so I'm not sure if you are, but when the nervous system is stressed, and we know that sitting activates the sympathetic nervous system, prolonged sitting shifts us to that side of the nervous system where we are moving downstairs in the brain from the thinking brain to what I call the basement bunker. It's more about like survival brain. And when the nervous system is shifting that way to more of what we call the fight, flight, freeze side of things, it starts to prioritize certain systems for survival and suppress systems that are not quite as important in the moment. It changes how we breathe. Digestion is shut down. It's why people with chronic stress have so many gastrointestinal problems. Elimination in that moment is not a priority. Interestingly, it steps back your immune system and growth and repair. So healing is not at the top of the list because we're more in survival mode. And this is a very interesting connection in terms of the stress of sitting. And I'm just going to go back here a moment. Okay, yeah, so I just go forward. The research is showing that these functions, as I've been alluding to, are also suppressed by sitting. So we kind of have this, what I consider like a double whammy. We're moving into the more defensive, anxiety oriented area of the nervous system by virtue of prolonged sitting pushing us there. And then those systems are further impacted by how the nervous system reacts when you're in that area. And this is not where you do your best thinking, which is why doing brain breaks, doing movement is so critical when we know we're sitting for long periods of time. And I mentioned the vagus nerve before. It passes through the diaphragm, the 10th cranial nerve, that breathing fully, which is such an important aspect of Asahi, that stimulates the vagus nerve. This is how the body talks to the brain. And a lot of times we want to think our way into things, but the thing is 80% of the information on this big wandering nerve, which goes down to a lot of the organs and then up to the brainstem, 80% goes this way and 20% goes that way. Using movement to activate the vagus nerve, using movement to talk to the brain. This is how we shift from stress response, which can be induced just by prolonged sitting. Nevertheless, all the other things in our modern lifestyle helps us to shift to the rest, the digest, and the restore side of the nervous system. We love activating, stimulating, increasing vagal tone. This cranial nerve is our friend. Something else that I think has been quite important to look at relative to the pandemic and other considerations is that we start to see how do you get that those issues around cardiovascular disease and lung disease, chronic disease and sitting. It's about chronic low level inflammation. And you're seeing so many reports coming out of the medical schools around this. And the thing that we heard a lot relative to COVID is the cytokines that can cause, these are things we need, but they can cause damage. We need to have inflammatory response in some regards, but when it is chronic and this low grade, then we see an impairment of the immune system, the healing process stalls, and that sympathetic nervous system overdrive, the nervous system going into defensive mode and not prioritizing immunity in the way that we want. It's okay in the moment, you don't want to stay there. And that becomes an issue with prolonged sitting. I think that what isn't so, the physical effects may seem very obvious, but the mental health effects not talked about as much. I've talked about anxiety. We're also seeing a connection with depression and just the exhaustion of prolonged sitting. And I'm going to just share a little story here. And I know I've mentioned the COVID pandemic, more than once, but it connects a lot of dots in my world. Dr. Darina Elbers is a pediatric neurologist. The U.S. stole her from Canada, frankly, and she's at Stanford. And she initially was heading the pediatric stroke unit, because we're seeing this as a growing issue in infants, small children, but she now heads the pediatric trauma unit. And she was at a very interesting talk I was at, and she was sharing the observation that they were seeing more and more children coming in towards the 21, 22 and ongoing panic attacks, anxiety disorders. It's the data I'm seeing. The adolescents just off the charts, but young children as well. And then her experience with her son, who she feels they have good parameters on, using digital media and so forth. But the reality is that kids, they were going to school online. They were so much more of their time was spent online. They couldn't be going and doing the things that they normally do, and the digit overuse syndrome. And as she talks about this as a neurologist, she talks about energy in and not out. And that's what I was talking about, staying in my pixel, sometimes for 6-7 hours a day, and all day events online, which I will no longer agree to. We have to do them differently, and we have to have time for movement and et cetera, because the body needs that discharge. You have to let it out. And when we don't, then we see problems like panic attacks. Okay, exercise, essential for mental health. It affects neurotransmitter levels, including, our well-being neurotransmitters like serotonin and oxytocin. We know exercise, and you'll see this, I believe that's in the Asahi our book, which I have right over here. I could even reach it. But the oxytocin appears, there's some new research showing that it has impact on joint pain. So, and we know, that when you have issues, it's even more important to move, that you don't step away from movement. It resets and balances the nervous system. There's specific movements that are calming, and I'm going to start now to lift up some particular points about Asahi, and I'm guessing that many of you are practitioners, but see all the little tabs in my book. But when you look at movements like clamshell, and you are folding, sliding the hands down towards the knee as you round the back and go forward, it's a forward fold. There are things that very specifically talk to the vagus nerve. They talk to the nervous system. And I saw right away that Asahi has those movements included. They're very much part of the process in addition to relaxation movements. There's eye movement. This too is very, very interesting because moving the eyes alone has a very big impact on the nervous system. And if any of you are therapists, you might be familiar with EMDR, which is kind of frontline treatment for certain forms of post-traumatic stress disorder. So including movement follows the eyes to begin with, but using the eyes and having that awareness of movement in the eyes is something that I don't see in a lot of exercise practices. Nevertheless, having a relaxation mode at the start of each of the 3 series of Asahi movement. We are seeing plenty of research, and I think it really needs to be lifted up, that exercise can be as effective as medication. It's a great partner to psychotherapy for depression. In fact, I would say it's essential because of what we were talking about earlier. What we have learned in the world of trauma and when stress goes toxic in the body and therefore the brain, pushing us downstairs in the brain, is that you must have bottom-up techniques. We talk about top-down, like psychotherapy, and bottom-up, working through the body and resetting, shifting the nervous system, stimulating the vagus nerve, and so forth. Movement is key to that, and it can open the door for top-down techniques. It's often what we need to do first. And so that's why somatic experiencing, all types of different polyvagal informed strategies in the world of both stress management, but also for trauma. Mindful movement has been noted particularly to alleviate depression symptoms. And I'm just going to make a comment here. This is something I'm acutely aware, having lost my mother not too long ago to Alzheimer's.
Oh, gee.
Well, if maybe folks can mute themselves, and then we'll have you unmute when we get to our discussion, which is coming very shortly. But the prolonged sitting reduces blood flow to the brain. Meta-analysis, that means whole bunches of studies being pulled together. It doesn't get any better in the world of health research, indicating that long-term sitting increases the risk of dementia, and that exercise can reduce it among adults that don't have the genetic risk. And hopefully we will see data that's moving towards also with the genetic risks as we move forward. But this is good news. This may be very familiar to all of you, but I who am training in this practice, am quite intrigued how the principles of Asahi align quite well with the issues that I see in my work, and then relative to the data that we see around sitting. So I've got some red check marks there for some that I'm going to lift up in the next few minutes, and then we'll open up to discussion. But and just noting that Asahi meets the World Health Organization recommendations for physical activity. But some things that we've already touched upon, that combining movement and breath, that's super important to people in my field, because we see a lot of folks that when anxiety or toxic stress, and especially when trauma is present, it's just telling somebody to take a deep breath. It doesn't work. It can't. Sometimes they can't, or they feel that they can't. So when you combine it with movement, it's accessible. Staying relaxed, creating the sensation of relaxation at the beginning of each exercise, and then even having it as part of some exercises, which I'm seeing in series 3. Moving slowly, repetition. I'm just going to highlight some of these as we carry on now. Beginning with relaxation, I've probably already said this, because of constrictions, because of how anxiety and trauma can affect, breathing, having that relaxation starts to shift the nervous system. The breath is the fast track to the nervous system, and movement is breath's good buddy. So this is the A team that's working for you. And we need to shift that nervous system to be able to release habitual tension patterns. When we, have that forward neck displacement. I remember walking into a physical therapist a number of years ago, and she said, when I was really having a number of problems, that she said, "Linda, stop wearing your shoulders like earrings." And I was like, oh, I didn't know I was doing that, but here's the thing. I see lots of children doing this. I now notice it. And I am always catching myself, but you have to become aware of the tension pattern to be able to release it. And just that when we relax the body, it's that bottom up. When you relax the body, it allows the mind to relax, and we can have the body awareness to notice things that we are doing, the habitual patterns that we've picked up. Asahi uses whole body movement, and it's just an intentional focus, which is in the practice, which is just another aha to me. Rhythm talks to the nervous system. The brain body is highly responsive to rhythm, the rhythm of the breath, but the knees, keeping that soft bend in the knees and a sinking and rising, there's a rhythm to that helps shift us. It has other functions as well, which I'll mention in a moment. And it enhances body awareness, of course, to have this whole body focus versus thinking, oh, all I'm doing is moving my shoulder. Repetitions and moving slowly. This is one of that brain rules, 101 in education and, teaching. This is how you begin to build new neural pathways and you strengthen existing ones. It hasn't really been understood that long. It's the revolution of neuroimaging that has really shown us how the brain works, how to help the brain when it's been hurt, and repetition and moving slowly are critical. In fact, that has transformed how we work with, how strokes are worked with. The capacity of the brain to change is enormous. Mindful movement releases a natural calming agent, like a natural tranquilizer, acetylcholine, and we want that. And acetylcholine, it improves attention, learning, memory. There's an area of the brain highlighted, like if you put your hands on the back of your head and felt like two little apples back there, that's your cerebellum. It's one of the last areas of the brain to mature, and it's going through an important developmental spurt during adolescence, stimulated by movement. Kids need to move a lot, and some of them aren't. That contraction and expansion with those flexed knees creates a pumping. It's woven throughout the 3 series, the sets of physical movement of Asahi, and it helps us to not just move circulation, and circulation has a pump, right? It's got the heart. The lymph system doesn't. That's why when we have surgeries that affect the lymph system, like mastectomies and such, movement will be so critical to move the lymph, but we all need to do that. And when we pump the body, such as we do with that sinking and rising, that's moving lymph. taking waste away. There's a portion of the circulatory system, the lymph, that is only going to move in that system if we help it move. Balance is being looked at now in a much bigger picture, and not just in terms of osteoporosis and fractures and such, but just that it is predictive. And no surprise, it has a much bigger connection to longevity, to our capacity to stay functional and active, and that the conversation around osteopenia, just so very prevalent here in the States, and osteoporosis, is that we've got to be looking at fracture prevention in a much bigger way, and that means working on balance. And while Asahi can be done sitting, or even in bed lying down, the focus of practice is standing. And there's a whole component on balance. And then when we think about the bones, that having spiral movements such as the full back twist, the striking and pounding that comes in the second series, these are unusual things for me to see when looking at different forms of exercise relative to the thought that's gone into this. And that is because it's a medically based research informed practice. So it's bringing these components to it. The dilemma in our modern lifestyles, and I refer to myself as a recovering scientist, because a huge amount of my work now is really looking at how we can work through the body to promote well-being and healing after several decades of way too much sitting, and a lifestyle overall that focuses here, and that disconnects us from body awareness. And there is a big price to pay in doing that. So, but it's never too late. The brain can change, and as can the body. But when we are disconnected from our bodies, a lack of body awareness, there's an increased risk of injury and re-injury, those habitual tension patterns. So building interoceptive skills, and that word interoceptive comes from the revolution that is happening in science around the nervous system, understanding the nervous system, understanding how to befriend your nervous system, and build this body awareness. And an interoceptive means feeling what's going on inside and noticing. And that's why I was asking you in the very beginning just to notice how you were, notice your breath, notice afterwards. And this is done in Asahi as well, noticing. So we're almost to the end of the slides, and I wanted to just do a tiny little movement and make a point here, because we've been sitting, and it is not the best way for the brain to learn. You can see the issues that I was talking about in some of these squares of people with their head forward, and that each inch that you bring that head forward increases the weight. The head is heavy, and it puts an additional 10 pounds each inch forward. And I have seen dramatic change and work with it a lot myself, but relative to the people around me in the last couple of the years, and this head forward position relative to being on technology so much, sitting, perhaps more than usual. And it's clearly an aging risk as well that begins to affect the balance profoundly. So just say to you, because we are sitting and I want to stay in my little pixel, but this is an Asahi movement in the first series. But if you would like to join me, because I'm going to do it for myself right now, I'm going to feel my feet on the ground again, whether you're standing or sitting. I'm going to notice my alignment. I'm going to notice my seat. Where are my shoulders? I'm bringing them back over my hips. How's my head and my ears over my shoulders? And I'm just going to raise my shoulders up and back and around. Such a little movement. And I can see one of you, and I see that it's more than your shoulders moving. And I could, maybe you can see that as well with me. I'm going to go another in this direction. I could inhale as I come up and then exhale, rounding a little bit as I come down. Now the other direction, I'm going to go forward now, not sure which way you started, and back and around. My shoulders, I'm raising them up and down, but my hands, my arms are relaxed. And just now notice where your shoulders land, because I'm pretty confident that mine are lower than when I started, because when we notice, when we can pay attention a little bit, when we can bring the breath into it and just realign ourselves, and sometimes it may be something just for a moment that can make a difference as we are doing our sitting and so forth. But ideally, I would stand up and do that. So I've just highlighted some components of physical fitness based on the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services folks, and then we have the Cochrane Review, and they're huge in the evidence world. You can hang your hat when Cochrane does a report. Here they've got 187 randomized controlled trials. We want solid research on this relative to the implications of sitting and the importance of movement, and we have it. And so they're talking about large muscle whole body movement. That's Asahi, that whole body focus. They having strength, endurance, and power. And as you look at the different practices, especially when we start doing the striking and some fast movements as you go into series 2 and 3, flexibility is throughout, working on balance, focused module in each of the 3 series. Then we get into some faster movements, particularly there's one that I'm just learning now in the series 3, where we talk about like a cat and fast forward and slow back. Point being, I just see these elements. They're part of the principles of the practice, and they're clearly what are being highlighted in guidelines that are coming out by the World Health Organization, by the departments of health here. And I am confident, because the Asahi's been around since 2004, that it's very much part of the Finnish recommendations, which I would love to see too. And because I see long COVID around me, a great deal of it, unfortunately, and it comes into my work because of, when you look at long COVID, we're talking about a disease of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, settling in the nervous system, and a key pathway for treating it relative to the mental fog, the chronic fatigue. These issues are autonomically driven. And so when we look at a practice that is, opening the body to the breath, that movement, restoring vitality that can be done gently, it is adaptable to whether we are standing, sitting, or in bed, and then moving forward with that. It can have a very, very important role in this. So I'm sharing it with colleagues that are looking at different aspects, and frankly, personally dealing with long COVID. I would say that I speak personally to where I live. Our healthcare system is not, they need more tools, and they need tools like this. They were not prepared to deal with a chronic issue like this. It is not our strength, and we are challenged. Movement is medicine. And as an epidemiologist, I'm expected, if I'm bringing something forward, that it is science-based. And being secular is a critical consideration as well, so that it's for everybody and that it's portable. And this is a big issue for me just because I'm in planes and then I'm in RVs in the lower 48. And that's what we call the States. And when I come to Finland, it's funny, if people ask, where are you from? We typically don't answer necessarily. I don't say American, I say Alaskan. And then they'll ask if you're American. And we're connected to Canada, in terms of landmass, and it just doesn't come to me right away. But it's very portable. And this is what I do now. How has my life changed since I have started getting involved with Asahi? Well, this is me last night taking a break from my computer and doing pulling out a module, doing, what's probably, as I did with you, the shoulders. Well, that's a good one because I know what's, happening. But then I forget and I remember, and the body remembers for us. And that's the power. When you do movement, you're in the present moment, and it brings us back, and it brings that wisdom of the body to work for us. So I just want to open up now. I'll stop the share. That's the Caribou Hills where I live. I'm a retired dog musher, and that was my beloved team. And I miss each and every one of them very much. And when I stopped, I wish I had Asahi during that time. It would have prevented a lot of injuries, which I now deal with. But also, when you shift in life from something that's very, very active, you need something in its place. So there are a number of ahas that have come to me that I hope have been useful sharing with you. And Margaret, I hope that was on point and part of expectation and okay relative to the vision of Asahi.
Yeah, I'm just speechless. I'm so thrilled with all this data that you've been able to show to us, because we have a lot of data in Finland, in the Finnish language, but we don't have a whole lot yet that we can present as well as you have just in the last 45 minutes.
Greetings
Yes.
from Finland. It was a very nice lecture. I'm very happy to hear it.
Thank you, Doctor. And I really enjoyed your lecture a few weeks ago. So that informed me for what I was doing today.
Yes, I'd like to introduce just Dr. Yrjö Mähynen. He is one of the developers of Asahi, and that's why we have such a strong basis in the foundation in medical science and in medical sports science. And now that he's retired, he's had time to research more and more, and he's right on the cutting edge with research. So you guys are going to make a great team together. I can feel that, Yrjö. And do we have any questions from the chat? I'm trying to look and see. But you can just speak up if there's somebody in the audience that has a question. The chat disappeared.
I can see Michelle's comment here, and I love that she shares here that she took the opportunity to move around a bit, and yes, that's what we need to do, and I just fully committed to it. And I also see how you shared that you did Asahi for 30 minutes and it transformed the rest of your day. And I guess that's how I came to be here, because I had a similar experience. And I see, this is the thing, a little means a lot. So whether we're just do a few minutes or we have the time to do a whole series, I now in the morning go outside and stand on the porch in what has been a very rainy summer, and it's the first thing I do. And it starts my day in a different way.
I was wondering if we could purchase a book that would teach us the movements.
Yes, we have the book that the doctor was demonstrating or showing in the beginning. It's called Asahi, the Nordic Health Practice. And
where can we purchase it?
it's available on Amazon and also on our webpage. So if you can go to www.asahiworld.com, asahiworld.com, then there's just a button you can push and it will take you straight to the page where you can order it from Amazon. We were so surprised and happy that we even won a medal as a finalist in the next generation indie book awards for this book, because it's a really very modern book. It has QR codes and you can go to different videos to see the different movements, and there's advice on how to control, or how a little practice of Asahi to help with panic disorders or performance anxiety, which I'm suffering from right now. So there's all kinds of good ways to use Asahi. It can be used as a way to help with insomnia, to sit on the edge of your bed and calm yourself down, or in the morning, like Linda was talking about, you can use it to perk yourself up and to get things flowing and going.
Is there anywhere else we can purchase it besides Amazon? Because I don't do Amazon.
I just told you.
Well, this book, we had to put it out from a Finnish source, and Amazon was an easy way to do it. So I'm afraid that's the only way we have right now.
Okay.
But you can talk, I think there's a little gift shop in Hurley, Wisconsin, Wisconsin, that's going to have it for sale. It's called Little Finland, and they're ordering 10 books, so they'll have it on sale there. So there might be gift shops that decide to take it on their stock then. I hope that will be the case.
Thank you very much.
Margaret, I see a couple of questions on the chat, and I was going to bring them up. And Dr. Mahanan is going to, these are questions that I think will be very important he will know far more in the answer, but I'll bring up the question and make a short comment and then hand off if that's okay, and Margaret as well. The first question is, how is this different than Tai Chi? And I know that there is a lot of experience and folks involved with Asahi being able to answer in their practice and answering that question. I from my exposure, what I would say is, when you look at the principles and some of the things we've lifted up in terms of being a secular practice and aspects that have been woven into this because of how it's informed by medical science, you will note some very significant differences. But Margaret and Doctor, would you like to comment?
Well, the first, of course, is the simplicity. Asahi is much more simple to learn and 1,000 times easier to remember. Asahi, or Tai Chi, is beautiful and it's a beautiful art, but Asahi wasn't built to be an art. It takes its influences from Tai Chi, Qigong, and from Eastern practices, but to make it accessible to everyone, it's been simplified, and all of the simplifications have been based on medical science. And also the fact that it has no connection to religious or any religious background, and no cultural background, no political backgrounds like some of the Eastern traditions have. So that makes it a lot more accessible in that way. And also it's symmetrical, and we do as much on one side as we do on the other. And some of the moves in Tai Chi do just seem to go to one direction. But I really love Tai Chi, and there's one of our instructors is a very highly respected Tai Chi instructor, one of the 4 developers, Ilpo Yalamo. So it's definitely in the background, but we've just made it something that modern Western people can accept and understand a little bit easier.
Well spoken.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add? Okay. Well,
There's
yes.
another question here, Margaret. Is that, shall I bring that forward?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. It's so the question is, I just found out bone on bone with my right knee and hip. What kind of exercises can I safely and painlessly do? I'm going to make a personal comment here and then, hand it over. Because I broke my, remember that those dog mushing injuries I was mentioning? I broke my knee a number of years ago, and it kind of, messed up. Hip, that classic diagonal pattern that you can end up with. And I think this is a key thing. Just talking personally, because I am not a doctor, not that I'm just a researcher, but personally, when you have something as accessible as, oops,
we're breaking up a little bit, but
breaking up.
yeah,
You can adjust the exercises. So my knee bend isn't going to be as deep as Margaret's for sure, but we're able to. You can work. You do less, and you figure out where the zone that you can work in is. But Asahi, in my opinion, is very much designed to be able to do that. And Dr. Mohan would please.
Yes, in osteoarthritis or a traumatic situation, you should move the joints very carefully. But every day you should train so it heals more effectively than if you just wait. The joints need movement. So the synovial fluid is getting better.
okay. Thank you very much. We also have a doctor specializing in rehabilitation, Dr. Fred Maynard from Marquette, and he'd like to say a few words on this subject. We're all here. There's 8 of us in this room watching this together here in Marquette, Michigan, on the campus of Northern Michigan University, which is the only university in the world that has Asahi on its curriculum. But go ahead, Fred.
Well, thanks, Margaret, for a chance to say. That question just struck me as being pertinent to my background as a practicing physician. Well, I'm retired now, but I practiced over 50 years in physical medicine rehabilitation, where our specialty's theme was actually the same as Asahi. I mean, movement is medicine.
That's right.
It's exactly that same issue. It's so important to our health. In fact, people used to ask us in rehabilitation, physical medicine rehabilitation, what was, people had trouble relating to what we did, because most medical specialties are organ system based, a neurologist dealing with the nervous system, or a cardiologist dealing with the heart and cardiovascular system, or the dermatologist dealing with the skin. Well, what does the physical medicine rehabilitation do? Well, it was really muscle. You see, because muscle, which is part of really the neuromuscular system, it doesn't function without the neurologic, but you got bone, it's totalistic, holistic, but at the same time, muscle is the critical issue. So when you get into this issue of Asahi and pain in a particular joint or part of your body, I think that is the advantage of Asahi, is it is very easy for an individual to try to make an adaptation. Don't do what doesn't feel good. I mean, that's the simple basic principle. Now, how you do the adaptation, I think there are a variety of options, and sometimes those are harder to figure out. But that's where, if you had an opportunity to speak to someone familiar with Asahi who also had a medical background or physical therapy, exercise, physiology background, they would be able to help you make the best adaptation that's possible. And sometimes certain conditions may say, you just don't do that one part of the exercise with that part of your body. You can still do everything else and get 98% of the benefit, you see, without doing it. And you don't have to fret about it. and be upset about it or feel inadequate about it until that problem gets better or has another avenue of treatment available to it. So I think that's the way I would tend to approach that. In general, if you're having pain in a joint, what you want to do is get the muscle stronger because then you're putting less stress on the more likely sources of the pain, which is either the joint, the cartilage, the ligaments, and the things around it. Pain directly from the muscle itself is more unusual. It can happen in certain conditions if you injure the muscle itself, but those are much less common as we get older and get arthritis. So there's a couple comments.
Oh,
Nice job.
thank you very, very much. We're having applause here in the room. We're so glad that Dr. Fred is on our team here and he's able to answer questions for our teachers. And just, it's great that he's also a practitioner of Asahi, but our time is running out, I'm afraid. Do you have any final comments, Linda, that you'd like to add? Or were there more questions that we need to cover on?
I think they're getting answered. There are questions about resources and that people answering that there are videos online to practice and another source for the book. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be together and meet my colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so very, very much. And we have a round of applause going here and we're all looking forward. There will be teacher trainings coming up. If something has sparked your interest, we have teacher training coming up in Brule, Wisconsin on the 5th and 6th of September. Another one in Willard, Wisconsin, which is the Christine Center from the 8th to the 10th of September. And the last one will be the 23rd and 24th of September in Champaign, Urbana area. And these you can find on the website, www.asahiworld.com. But thank you, and thank you, FinFest. We had a great turnout at FinFest, and this partnership started in 2016, and I hope it will continue because FinFest isn't just about history and traditions, it's also about cutting edge new research and new innovations that come from Finland, and I think Asahi is one of those. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.